Hello everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum's Artifact Video Series. My name is Ryan Duffy and I'm the director of the museum. And this week we're going to talk about probably our most important artifact that we have in the entire museum, and that is actually the building itself, the Holland Land Office. So we're going to talk about sort of the creation of the building and its history and the many changes that have happened to it over its over 200-year existence now. And we're going to show images of the land office as it changed over time and the different uses that it had during its history. So sit back and enjoy the history of the Holland Land Office itself. The Holland Land Office building was built in 1815, and it was made of local limestone quarried from around the Lewiston Road area. Now the walls were about 20 inches thick, and they were built this way in order to be like a bank and to be as fireproof as possible. And then inside they put iron doors over their vaults, which were dug directly into the walls. Now the building was separated into 8 rooms, 4 offices downstairs and 4 upstairs with a central staircase, and this was meant to be the central office for the entire Holland purchase, where all the land of Western New York would be sold, or at least the paperwork from other sales would eventually make it before it was sent to the higher-ups in Philadelphia and then Amsterdam. The land office would operate in that capacity until around the mid-1840s, when eventually the Holland Land Office decided to sell all of the remaining assets and eventually leave the United States. However, those land companies that did take over those assets continued to use the building in the same capacity till around 1860 before it had its first major change. The next owner of the building was Mrs. Bryan, who ran a seminary, a school for young ladies, and the children were housed in the old Ellicott Mansion kitty corner from the Holland Land Office, but she bought the land office building as well to be the classroom and was particularly useful for the music classes, as the thick stone walls actually kept out the noise from Main Street. Now, the building was kept mostly the same, though a new central staircase was put in with a little bit more ornate wood, and the school operated until 1880, until it eventually moved to Toledo, Ohio. In 1880, Mrs. Bryan's daughter Ruth actually sold the building to the Free Methodist Church of Batavia, and this was actually their church for about 8 years until 1888. Now, some major changes were made while the Free Methodists were here in the building. They actually took out one of the dividing walls in one of the downstairs rooms, including the chimneys and fireplaces on the west side, which drastically changed the building, and that was their worshiping space. But it was still kept in good care until it was sold to a Mr. Reuben Lawrence of Bethany in 1888, and he ran it as a tenement apartment building and led to a lot of disrepair until it was eventually saved by the next owners. The building had gone to such disrepair that in 1893 it was actually threatened to be torn down. This galvanized the community in an effort to save it. Now, the Holland Purchase Historical Society was created with Mary Richmond at its head, and one of the main proponents being John Kennedy. And they sought to raise the $800 to pay off the mortgage and buy the property. By the following year, they were able to, with the last $350 being raised by the Batavia High School class of 1894. And on October 13th, 1894, the building was officially dedicated as the Holland Land Office Museum. Now, it operated for several decades, in and out of existence briefly due to some financial difficulties, and the ownership changed from time to time, sometimes being owned by the school district, besides the Historical Society. And in the 1940s, it was actually leased to the American Red Cross, as well as the Daughters of the American Revolution from time to time, using the space as their headquarters. Now, in 1944, the first addition was added to the land office. A cement block structure was added to the back, which was originally meant to be for the storage of a modern heating unit. Now, the county eventually took over ownership of the property in 1948 and still does to this day, with the Historical Society operating the museum and owning the artifacts inside. Now, the structure stayed relatively the same until 1970 when the West Wing, which is our military wing today, was added and was the first addition. And by the end of the 1970s and the beginning of the 1980s, urban renewal had happened in Batavia, and a lot of the homes and businesses that were around the museum were torn down, leaving green space and allowing for some expansion, which happened in 1977 when our East Wing, which is still called that today, was added, and it was meant to be the office of the County Historian and History Department, which it operated in that sense until 1999 when the office moved to a new structure, leaving the museum to be solely occupied by the Historical Society. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Artifact video series and learned a little bit more about the Holland Land Office building as a landmark and its own artifact, in a sense, as part of the museum, especially its history and the different entities that occupied it during its over 200 years sitting here in Batavia. Well, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the rest of them on our YouTube channel, Holland Land Office Museum. And if you find anything particularly interesting, give it a like and maybe even subscribe to the channel, as it helps us out a little bit and gets you notified ever quicker when we do release new videos. But as always, the best way to come and learn about the artifacts we have here and the stories that they have to tell is to come by and see them for yourself at the museum. We'll be happy to share even more information than what is in these little videos. So we hope to see you next week and enjoy the information.